everybody. Welcome to the 18th TouchDesigner Roundtable. We're very pleased that so many of you made the way through wind and storm and ice. And we have three exciting presentations today. The first one sits right next here to me. It's Moritz Hilscher, also known as Krumme Visuals, best translated maybe as Crooked Visuals, even so he doesn't like to have it translated. He's a visual artist, but also a developer with a deep background, and he works for LaserAnimation Sollinger, which gives me the opportunity to also welcome Michael Sollinger, who's the provider of what most people say are the best art lasers in town, or maybe in the Republic, or maybe in Europe. And Moritz is going to talk about how you can use TouchDesigner to control lasers, and he also brought a very powerful laser here. That's why we have a safety zone here and a safety button, because this is like the real stuff. And so without further ado, well, maybe some further ado, like always, I have to say, please, if you have something to say, get in contact with us. We're always looking for speakers. We don't know who's going to speak in January, so if any of you feels they have something to say, you're very welcome. And the other thing I have to say, thanks a lot to Wieland, who's helping organizing. Thanks to Marta, who's helping organizing. Wieland is doing the tech, Marta helps with organization, and also much thanks to Helene, who helps out wherever she can to make this thing happen. And now I'm looking very much forward to Moritz's presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. I'm Moritz, like Stefan already said, work for LaserAnimation, and yeah, today I'm going to talk a bit about show lasers and TouchDesigner. I'm going to show you a bit how show lasers work, give you like an overview how you can access them with like different programs in different ways. And yeah, like Stefan said, I also have a laser with me, which I will use to demonstrate a few things. It's just there behind me. Yeah, and then I will also show some like example some older example TouchDesigner things as inspiration. Yeah, so perhaps I should also say that of course you should be careful when you work with lasers, and you should get educated about it, and they are definitely no toys. So yeah, so perhaps a bit more about me. Actually, I'm a software engineer. I finished my master studies last year. I studied IT systems engineering in Potsdam, and mostly I did computer vision and machine learning there. And also in my spare time I like to do like some multimedia, video, image, art things. Mostly it's about like using some using some phenomena from computer vision to distort videos in interesting ways. For example, using optical flow, or recently I'm playing a lot with slit scans and making like weird parallax scan videos. So if you're curious about it, you can just check out my Instagram, Krumme Visuals, or just hit me up later. Yeah, and I'm doing these things mostly with TouchDesigner, also with some custom Python scripts, OpenCV, these kind of things. And yeah, I'm using TouchDesigner for about 3 years now. Before that, I was like trying to write my own software for like node-based programming, where I could write shaders in there. But then I discovered TouchDesigner, and like discovered it as the way that like how I would have made it if I had like many more years of time. So I switched to that. Yeah. So, and about our company, like about LaserAnimation, we are a manufacturer of show laser systems that includes projectors, controllers for making the content, and also the software to like configure or control the devices. And we are doing all the research and development of the components ourselves. That includes like mechanics, optics, electronics, firmware and software, and we are doing all of that in our office in Schöneberg, where we also assemble the devices by hand, and then we mostly sell the devices. Sometimes we also rent them out. Usually we don't really do laser shows on our own, but we do like support in custom installations that need custom hardware or software. For example, some things that you might have seen here in Berlin, this thing called Deep Web in Kraftwerk, which needed a very special calibrations for the lasers to hit these moving balls. Then there was also this recent installation at Halle am Berghain, this life of Michael did that. Yeah. And then also you might have heard about this ongoing ABBA Voyage show in London, where we supplied and programmed the lasers for 2 songs of the show. And yeah, and I'm, like me at work, I'm mostly doing software development for PC and Mac. Recently I also got a bit into programming firmware for the projectors, and also I'm doing like custom software for custom installations, and also I'm like working with software such as TouchDesigner and NetLaser, and testing how the laser output works, and also giving them help how they can implement it. And yeah, so let's talk about like what a show laser actually does. There's often like some misconception about it, how it works and how it compares to a video projector. So and what a laser projector is, it's actually it has multiple laser sources which make beams of lasers, and you usually have like one source for each color that you need. Like usually it's at least red, green and blue, but sometimes you also have like colors like yellow and cyan, and these are combined using optic elements to a single beam. And then you have these 2 mirrors that can rotate. They are called scanners, and they can deflect the beams in the X and Y into different directions, and you can move them very quickly, and by that you can like scan a path, and when you do that really quickly and repeat that path like lots of times in a second, then it appears to the human eye as if there's like a steady shape. And of course you can also quickly like turn these single laser beams on and off to create different colors and to draw different shapes. So what you yeah? It's galvanometers. It's magnetically, right? Yeah, but still they are like mechanical things. Yeah. So yeah, I will show you these effects later. Yeah. Yeah, and so what you need in the end is some signal that controls how the scanners move, and how the colors are turned on and off or dimmed like during that path. And that's quite similar to this, perhaps you know this kind of oscilloscope music, where you like play a stereo sound to an oscilloscope with a cathode ray, and that stereo sounds basically with the left and right channel, they are mapped to X and Y axis, and they are like drawing this path. And this music has the effect that like on the one hand side it makes a path, but on the other hand side it also makes some specific sound. You can hear it and see it, and the cool thing is that I can also play this this kind of music. I can play it on the laser projector, which is behind me, and I can also turn on the music. It's a bit different because I had to I had to filter the signal a bit with the low pass filter, because otherwise it's too much for the scanners. But yeah. So much for that for now. And for like quite a long time, these kind of signals for lasers, they were like transmitted in these analog ILDA cables with like huge connectors, and then the lasers were mostly analog devices. So these signals more or less like directly went to the scanners, and also for quite some time these signals were generated using like specialized hardware and software. For example, here you can see like the interface and the hardware device, which is a laser graph DSP, which was originally developed by Michael and the company in the 90s, and it's like a completely custom hardware platform with a custom operating system, and which can run standalone, and it's all geared towards programming laser shows, and it's still used by like quite some people today. But of course it requires like really special knowledge to program these things and to work with them, and also with these ILDA cables, it can be like these cables can become quite heavy, and you always have this like one-to-one mapping from a controller to a projector. And so yeah, when a flexible routing is possible when you want to change something. But luckily nowadays our devices, they are like more digital, and they can be controlled only by network, or I mean, at least you can, if you want, you can use only network to control them. Like they still have some analog input if you need, but usually they are just controlled via network, and you can use like a PC and the Mac to configure all the things you need on them, and also live stream the content to them. And what we are doing with the content now is, instead of using these analog cables, we are just putting the content into digital audio files with multiple channels. So here you can see one file displayed from TouchDesigner, where you have like X, Y, RGB channels, and the X and Y describe the path of this picture I will show to you in a moment. And then we have this like you can see how the colors are turned on and off. And yeah, so we put the content into AAF files. It's just like a standard multi-channel audio file format, and which like any program can basically read. Like we put some extra information into the header, for example, what kind of channels we have in there, and we put some markers in there for like later editing. But otherwise it's just like standard multi-channel audio files. And then what we are doing with these like network controllable things of the projectors, we can like use real-time audio streaming protocols to like live stream the content to the projectors via network. And there are different options for that. For example, commonly we use AVB. It's called Audio Video Bridge. It's a really time-sensitive audio streaming protocol. It's quite specialized. You have like guarantees, like when the data arrives, and you have like steady streams, and like no data gets lost. But it's quite a complicated protocol sometimes, and you need special switches for it. And then there's also Dante, which is a protocol quite known in the audio world. And a bit newer, there's this protocol called IDN. It's an open protocol specified by ILDA, by the International Laser Display Association. And it's a bit more simple and based on UDP and easier to use. And you don't need any special network hardware or any special network interfaces. You can just like more or less use any network hardware. And there are many programs that can already send it, and also some adapters that can receive it and convert it to this analog signal. But we have now implemented in our projectors that we can receive this protocol, which is quite a new thing, and the first projectors in the world that can actually like receive this protocol directly. And yeah, so yeah, let's play a bit around with the setup. So I brought to you here, komme ich da raus? Okay, so what I have here for you is it's a Phenon Accurate projector. It's a fairly small lightweight projector, but has 7 watts of power in red, green and blue, like all together. And then I have a network switch here. It's a Luminex switch. You can also use it for this AVB, but and it has power over Ethernet, to which I have connected this the safety button, and then my computer is just connected via network also. And then we have this program called LA Toolbox, which you can use to like discover all the devices in the network. And this is also a new beta of the software. It's called Spaghetti, because you can draw nodes to like connect senders and receivers of the content, but not yet for this IDN thing. And now I can like click this click on this projector to like see all the settings. For example, we can now see that it is running at like 20% of the output power. Like on this projection tab, I can select where the content comes from. For example, from the analog input from this like network stream. Then there are like several test patterns. For example, the circle and this DGC. And this DGC, like the digital geometric correction, we are using it to so the user can basically control where the laser projects to. And then we are using a homography internally to like put it there perspectively correct. Yeah, and then we also have these media files, so you can just upload these AIF files to the projectors, and don't have to worry that your TouchDesigner patch really makes it for the show. So for example, here's the file, and this is just some test pattern, and yeah. Okay, so yeah, and also we have some safety features. You can draw a safety mask in here, for example, where the audience is and where you don't want to project to, or where projectors are or cameras are, and so on. And then you can also down here you can configure these laser disable buttons. So we have one here, and if I like press this button, then the laser instantly turns off. And now when I turn the key and turn it on again, okay, now I have to turn the key, then we can see like it says like standby because of the laser disable button, and now it's automatically restarting again. And this would also work when I like disconnect the button. And it would also work without the PC, so this is just an interface to this thing. It's already like running in the firmware of this device. So yeah, and now we can like live stream some content for it. For example, we have this small tool called LA Player. It's basically like a VLC media player. It's for playing back files, but it also considers like some specifics what's needed for this a laser file. So for example, right now I have like loaded one file, and then I would connect to a virtual sound card, and there are like different virtual sound cards, or like also physical sound cards for this AVB thing, and like this, and then you connect to some virtual sound card, and these virtual sound cards basically implement all these different network protocols. So if I connect to this EDN sound card now, and then like press play, then we get this this file like live stream to the projector. And we can also, for example, use like synchronize this playback to timecode, and also like in these AIF files, so far these were just like single frames, but of course we can also put whole shows into it. And somehow this is a bit slow right now. So yeah, this is a show. It's a bit of a cliche laser thing, but you get what I mean. And also we have some tools for visualizing the content. So I have some like visualization here, where I can also, if I have a show which would involve fog, then I could also get a little preview of that. Okay, so let's try a few things with TouchDesigner. Okay, so the thing in TouchDesigner, what you do with lasers, you use these SOPs, the surface operators, which can define and modify like vector geometry, and then you use the laserCHOP, which converts these geometric points into the signal that the laser needs. And then you would use an audio device out to like send it to the sound card, or you could also like record it to an AIF file, or like using some custom plugin of us, you can also like send it to the visualization again. Yeah. So yeah, now I would like to show you like a little bit how this laserCHOP works, what kind of parameters it has. So we can like look at this stream. It's like basically it's like an endless stream of like how the scanner moves around. And so I have this little component here which visualizes this path for us by putting the time into the z-axis. So what we can see here already now, like in the beginning, our geometry only had 2 points, and this laserCHOP for once it inserts intermediate points, so that we have an optimal scanning speed, that the scanners are not going too fast because they are limited in that, because they are like these mechanical devices. And also like to make this a bit like more convenient, we have like this preview to make it a bit more convenient. I can like extract the the single laser frames from it because there are some markers in the stream, and now we can see like what the laser does exactly for like one line, for like one going through. Yeah, and this so this parameter which is relevant here was this the scanning speed. It's controlled by the step size. So basically it says that if there's a like larger distance than this, then it inserts intermediate points. Yeah, and also if I could add some like some more line in here, for example. And like add these together. And now we can see that like how this path looks like, so that it draws like one line, and then with the color encoding of the green and red, you can see that it then turns the laser off and goes to the other line and then draws the other line. And also you can see in here that like at the end of the line it waits a bit until like the scanner has really arrived there, and only then it turns off the laser and then goes to the other line, and then it also waits a bit until it turns the laser on again. And these are controlled using these pre-post blanking on and off delay things, which are just specified in milliseconds. And yeah, so pretty much in the laserCHOP these are default values that are good for our projectors, and for other scanner systems you might have to adjust it a little bit. Yeah. And also sometimes you have to take care with like different kinds of geometry. For example, if I'm taking like a rectangle now, then you can see it doesn't come out as a rectangle, but it comes out as this rounded thing. And in this path visualization, you can now see that it just sends to the scanner these points and then goes around, and this signal goes straight to the scanners more or less. So the scanners don't know that they should wait there, and they are affected by inertia and basically like going around shapes. So what you have to do is you have to you have to wait a bit, and in the laserCHOP you have this option called the vertex hold time. So there's a minimum and the maximum vertex hold time, and the minimum vertex hold time is for angle of 0 degrees, and the maximum vertex time is for like an angle of 180 degrees. So if I increase this, we can see how it waits for a longer time in here, and how this becomes more sharp. And yeah, so but the thing is, like sometimes when you are, like when I'm connecting the lines again, you can now see how the endpoints got really, really bright here. So sometimes you have to adjust these values per object, and that's why like sometimes you need some extra little components. For example, this one like repeats the points manually, and so if I add all these points together again and like decrease this global weighting thing, then you get nice shapes for all of them. And also like some other thing you have to consider with yeah, I just add more points, exactly. It's done using a script SOP. Yeah. And yeah, and for example, now I'm taking a circle, and you can see that it's not really closed, because it's not stopping at the right thing, and what you like what you need to make these like these closed shapes like really nice with a laser, you need to add some overlap first, so that the beginning and the end overlap. You can see it a bit here, or you can also of course see it in the path here, so that the beginning and the end are overlapping. And then you add some soft blanking, meaning that you like ramp up the brightness and then you ramp it down again in the end, and then you get a really nice looking circle. So, and yeah, and then you basically can do like lots of funny things with the SOPs. Just a few more things you can. It's always nice to convert chops to SOPs, or to use the copy SOP, which is also really nice with stamping, which I don't have an example here, but you can look it up. And also, of course, you can set colors of the geometry using the point SOP. And yeah, so yeah, this is just some example of some basic example. You can ask if you have questions. You can ask more later, and I can. No, it wouldn't be applied because this material is for rendering, and it just renders to a texture. But this is just like for lasers, you have to use the SOPs that are living on the CPU and not on the GPU yet. Yeah.
In your demo file before you showed, we saw some flickering of the images that we showed, and now it's steady. Did I get it right that the flickering is coming from we are overriding the scanners, and they are not coming in the speed as if they should show it on the wall, and that's where the flickering is coming from?
No, the flickering comes because like the scanner is like always going around the path that we are telling it to do. And the flickering comes because it cannot do the path like 60 times a second anymore. That's because it's only like doing it 20 times or something like that.
So we're feeding it too much geometry, and it doesn't really make it on turn.
I mean like we are not we're not really feeding it too much. We are just like the laserCHOP generates, like it just looks at the geometry and then generates some path, and then it just outputs it to the scanner. It's just like how we can generate it and how we. But yeah, kind of yeah.
Also the path is too long.
Yes,
because it takes the time, of course, to do the path.
And there's too many objects, and it doesn't get
so then the path is too long, and so it takes because they have a limited speed, of course. So they and then the eye takes, okay, you have the geometry, it takes its
So we are.
with the scanners they are used. But there are differences. Very low speed scanners.
Mosquitoes.
There are high speed scanners.
That's a budget matter.
It's definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. I understand.
You can offer the pair of scanners of this quality here is already just the scanners without any electronics. It's more than 1,000 euro. Yeah, and so of course a cheap laser detector would cost like 50 euro or 100 euro. It cannot have those scanners. Yeah.
Did you actually use multiple lasers to take several parts of the panel
You can do.
and then put them to be one panel?
Yes.
I have a few more little things to show. Just some.
Actually, it was interesting in exactly this. When you combine multiple projectors, is there a way to kind of, like what you showed before, to match each one exactly?
Yeah, like you can use this DGC features of us to like you put the lasers next to each other, and then you make each laser like project at the exact same thing. And then, for example, in TouchDesigner, if you have this like geometry, then you could make some component which like splits up the geometry such that each laser.
Tried a lot that always have this kind of either some round edges or like this
Mhm.
kind of weird overlapping, which are not very connection. So I was kind of very interested in the component that you showed to make, for example, the circle continuous. This is something that you custom made.
Yeah, but it's something that we that like we would also supply if someone wants to, use it. So yeah. Now I just wanted to show like a few more examples of what I did with the lasers. So like in the beginning when I started working here, I did like a few little just a few little demos where I used the laser and the conventional video projector, just to an example of like here's some video and the laser lines are displaced using optical flow, or I made these lines are like connected by some rules in the circle, and they are moving and they are projected by the laser, and then the beamer does some like afterglow effect. So just some things in the beginning that we were hoping to put at the fair for demonstrating some like interesting stuff with TouchDesigner. And then this summer I was at a small festival with friends where we collectively organized the stage, and I wanted to try something new for my laser setup there. And there's this new program called MatLaser. It's an extension of this mapping tool MatMapper, and in MatLaser you can generate laser contents by tracing like the edges in the video and then send it out to the laser. So what I did was I like generated some video content in Touch, like some basic shapes that I wanted, for example like some waves or some vertical waves or some like basic shapes, and then I exported these videos and I imported them into Resolume where I could like easily trigger them, and then I added some effects on top of that and some colors and like some further color things, and then I sent it into MatLaser to generate the laser content, and it worked out really well, and I was quite happy with it because it was like quite convenient to like control that show in Resolume, and it was easy to change the effects, and there was no spaghetti node code involved when changing things during the night, and also like lots of friends could play around with it, so I didn't have to spend like all the nights in the front of house, and I could actually also enjoy it and still feel that I'm like in control of it and can do the things that I want. And
What was the festival? What was the festival?
It's a really small non-commercial one, you probably don't know it, and they also don't like to have their name told somewhere, so
But actually, if you just trace some video or
Mhm.
picture in Touch
Mhm.
and send it to the laser, it would produce the same effect, right?
no, because the laser doesn't work that way. The laser expects as input signal the signal with the path and the
Yeah,
colors.
okay, you can trace it in
Yeah, of course you can also use the trace swap, and Yeah. And of course like you need to do some of these tricks like the waiting times in the corners and the like overlaps and something like that, and then that's just convenient what like Matte Laser already does, and I didn't have to implement it in TouchDesigner myself, and I could also do all the input mapping, like which part of the video belongs to which projector. So that's why I did it using Matte Laser.
So it optimized like the edges as well.
Yeah, and you can configure it, like how sharp you want the edges to be, and
Is it free?
no, I don't think so. No, but yeah. And then another little example, I was at the village, at the cottage of a friend's grandma, and I had the laser with me for playing around a bit, and there I like made the geometry of the house in SOPs, and then I output it to the laser and used the DGC to like get it at the right place, and then I made like different effects using like clip SOP or carve SOP or yeah, some effects like that, and then also got some nice building mapping. Yeah.
This is just with one laser.
Yeah, it's with one of these. Yeah. So, yeah. Oh, also one more thing. There's also Daniel Dafobo made this tutorial about lasers, which you can also check out. It's quite nice, multiple parts, and he also explains the things like the parameters about the laserCHOP, and derivative is also doing some work right now to get this like overlapping and soft blanking and things like that directly into the laserCHOP. And we are also still working on like I'm still working on like publishing some components that I made, which should make some workings with lasers easier. So yeah.
Did you ever get to play around with camera rolling shutters and lasers, like for TV productions, and having effects going with the rolling shutter and sync with the refresh rate of the laser?
And like not professionally, but I tried it recently with a friend.
Can you explain something of that? I heard from a friend about this, but not really an understanding of how it really works. I understand it from the camera side, but I don't understand it from the laser side. Like, can you influence the frequency of how the laser is reproducing a line? Can you do that?
Well, yeah, since like I'm completely in charge how the signal is generated here in TouchDesigner, and so what I have to do is I have to like append points to my geometry to make like this generated laser frame exactly like 1/50th or 1/25th of a second long, and then if I get this right, yeah, so basically if I achieve the same rate with the laser as the camera, then we have the like laser somewhere fixed in the camera shutter picture, and then if you move the laser content in time a bit, then you can influence where it appears.
Okay, so you synchronize the frequency of the laser with the camera, and then you basically just shift your picture around, and that's
Kind
how
of.
you create these. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So any more questions or?
And the software that you use for controlling the lasers, where you send the signal from TouchDesigner, in-house software, or
Oh, which one do you mean again? The
one that you showed in the beginning?
this LA player.
The laser and stuff.
Ah, yeah, this is a development of us, yeah.
Yeah, and you are keeping it for yourself, or you have like some
No, of course it's like
No, it comes with
it comes with laser.
it comes with
So if you buy a laser, you do it. And what is the price of the laser?
to ask Michael. we can chat about it later maybe.
Just an idea. It's affordable for
this price I think is 350,000.
1,000.
Can you maybe say a bit about the safety and like so very dangerous? You shouldn't go into them directly.
That's really difficult to say on a general basis, you know.
Is relatively close to the audience, but
Not because of the time.
but yeah, but it's relatively close still. Like,
No, this is
like how do you define those parameters? How do you define the safety limitations of everything?
you have to ways you have to measure and you have to calculate.
So that basically the rule is always like stay away from an area that eyes can be for this work.
So I typically I don't like to put laser light into my eyes. Yeah? So I prefer the like green shows. I would always do it like this. Maybe because I quite prefer it. Like there are also good ways to use it for green shows, but to still not go into the audience. You can do some tricks and show on different lenses out. Then there are the other possibilities to in the area of the audience to use some special lenses to run laser beam again. I think it's very simple. Yeah. And then for example what I did for Hello Sun for the first time, yeah, for the painting, this was not stained with the lenses. This is a line optic. And with this, you spread the beam into the dot in a line, and then with this we were able to have a good projector to the audience in the possible about 5 to 8 meters. Yeah, but we had to carefully measure it, and because of the distribution of the lens is not uniform, so you have to really measure and go all along, and then put your barrier where it's safe.
But still, this could also go in your eyes on that installation. I was wondering actually how strong was the laser.
Actually, this was a wonderful result. So we had so this was even special one. We said cyan, it was cyan 5 watts of cyan, and because of the color that was wanted, we added a little bit of yellow. So it should be some watery white. A little bit. It was matching to the color that was used in the video, and so we wanted this. And and because of the lens spreads out. I couldn't have done this with the scan screen. No way, because even if a beam is scanned, it travels fast, but in a single moment, it's still the full beam and hits your eye with the full beam. Even when it travels along, the pulse is very short, but still it's full beam. No way.
Yeah, I was wondering.
So if I were to stand in that corner over there and like bend to my knees and accidentally get the light in my eyes, it would not be harmful in this case.
In the corner,
Yeah.
no way.
But then how is that safe?
There were
Because
fences.
there was a barrier. There was a fence. And this, exactly as I said, so we measured exactly like fences to be exact.
Okay.
How do you measure it actually?
You measure there are power meters. I used a special power meter with that like collects all the light that comes into an aperture, and it's calibrated, and you can do this, and then you have to use the aperture of a certain size, and it's 7 millimeters, and you need
It was a
so
pleasure to
it's,
press it.
you need some equipment. And you need to know what to do.
Okay, I'm sorry I have to cut you up there. We're going to have a break for 15 minutes. Feel free to continue this conversation, but we will start with the next speaker in 15 minutes, and we will see a little bit of notch. So, see you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
thank you for coming back in from the cold and the smoke. And I'm very happy to introduce the next speaker. He's born in Montreal but lives in Berlin for quite a while now. It's Patrick Doan, better known as Defasten. You will recognize his work by his undistinguishable style, I'm sure. He's not using TouchDesigner. Shame on you.
Sorry, yeah,
Right?
well, this is my introduction. This is my
Very
introduction.
happy to have him here and to talk about real-time graphics and visuals. And without further ado, Patrick.
Thank you.
Let us know.
Thank you for the introduction, Stefan. Yeah, so that cuts a little bit of time on my own intro. But I actually did a workshop in Touch in Montreal in 2013, but I was working for some studios there in the music industry, and Touch was still, it felt kind of new, and I was still used to using After Effects, but now I'm using Notch. So let's get started. So this is live? Yeah, okay. Basically, yeah, so I've been using Notch for 3-4 years now. And my talk won't be super technical. It's more about the content that I do and the stuff I like, and more about what I've been using Notch to do with client projects and stuff. So yeah, I've been working under the name Defasten since 2002. So it sounds like half a lifetime really for me. And now I basically use Notch, and it changed the way that I do my style and the way I work. And real time means that you can cut a lot of time from doing pre-renders, and now I can't think of working any other way. So I think with TD it's almost the same thing. You just create content live and you just see the previews live, so that's really, really cool. Yeah, so I'm gonna do a bit of background info on how I came about as a graphic artist and 3D, and then into motion design. I guess you could say I've been into motion design before it was called that, starting off as a VJ in Canada and doing club events and flyers and graphics and stuff. So this is me in my home studio that I was able to update last year during the lockdown. I had to keep myself busy doing things. So this is kind of where I'm planning also to do some talks that I'm going to post online as well. So yeah. But let's talk a little bit about, why I'm doing the stuff that I'm doing now. It's, I think growing up as a teen in Canada, I had to look outside of my own country for inspiration. So I was into anime that had a lot of focus on sci-fi elements. And it was just new ideas that was just, as a teen, it really inspires you. And I think everyone has gone through this phase, possibly. And then obviously I got into gaming, which is kind of strangely kind of my introduction to real-time graphics. And a lot of people in real time come from a gaming background as well. So it was a perfect fit. And obviously all these worlds they were exploring. And then eventually music, most of it was coming from Europe. So all this different genres and styles of stuff really inspired me. And the whole rave techno culture around it was also very quite inspiring, which didn't really exist in Canada and was imported basically. And then around the late 90s, early 2000s, there were access to the internet, and then you could look at these amazing videos, and I was like, this is what I want to do, and get paid to actually do it. And this combined with pop culture that I was into at the time, in movies, basically creating narrative through kind of advanced technique of graphics and stuff. And then I started with Photoshop that I downloaded like everybody else, and then did graphics like this and stuff. And so there was a few years of practicing and getting used to my technique, and then I started doing some work by 2008, 9, 10, and then strangely enough in Montreal there were a lot of production companies working in the music industry, and I worked for them, and I won some awards, and I was on some high-profile projects, and it was a good way for me, even though I kind of had this underground style technique, to really try to popularize it and understand how working with clients is like, and putting your artistic ego behind and working on larger scale projects. And then eventually I found out actually that I could kind of bridge my own style with the proper artists as well. And you learn things a lot like this rather than on a theoretical level at school, where you're just focused on a lot of technique and concept. But eventually, I think that the technology caught up as well, where we were able to do stuff in real time. And, you know, this is kind of my journey today, basically. And I think it's opened doors for me. I was actually kind of burnt out a few years ago on doing motion graphics the old-fashioned way. And then doing stuff in Notch was kind of like, wow, this is actually not so hard once you get used to this node-based patching concept. And actually, Notch is in some ways a lot easier to use than TD. It's really designed to do graphics, really, mainly. So now I'm going to show you my demo reel. The first demo reel that I've done since maybe 2015, and it's all basically content that I've done in Notch.
You take a bite, your calming voice silently whisper, how do you see your life in time? And is it worth all of these blisters, these broken lips I want and tired, but our time not yet written, our embassy burning inside.
And my talk about how I made those projects, and I'm going to open up those projects in Notch and show you a little bit about how it works. But I'm a little bit early on time, so I just want to show you a video I did in 2006, and so that you can compare how my style has changed over time. And this is kind of like old school pre-rendering in After Effects. And this went around the festivals also at the time. And I also want to compare with a video that came out in 2013 by Muse, which I actually worked for after I discovered this video. But there's kind of some similarities here. I just thought it was funny. So it's not the first time that my stuff has been copied, but it's funny because I actually know the studio that did this, and possibly the artist that worked on this project. But this is probably like the third time that I found out, and it happened a lot at the beginning of my career as well, when there wasn't much stuff online, so people were just borrowing from the same videos that they actually saw. But it was an artist who's based in California who worked with Muse, and she sent me this video, and she's like, hey, I want a video that looks like this. And I was like, okay, you want me to copy my own style? So I thought, okay, that was really, really interesting there. And that was just like in 2018. right. Next, I'm going to talk about what I did for the Mira Festival in Barcelona. So they commissioned me to do work for an artist here, Azu Tiwalin, and she does this kind of dub techno mixed with North African traditional trance music. And I'll show you a short demo that was actually posted on Fact Magazine. Actually, it was for the Fact Magazine article. So I recreated the actual stage concert layout in Notch, so it's just not really me there. But the screen layout was actually really nice. I had a really nice, long, wide screen that was 3 projectors together. Like each projector was 4K, so it was essentially a 12K projection. But I was going to run this in Notch on my laptop directly in the builder, and I opted on like a 4K resolution, which was actually fine. So I did a lot of research, as with every project that I start with that are more creative. I do research on the artist, on their cultural background, and how to exemplify this in the visual design. So I did some research on different costumes and these ornaments that people wear. So I'll just show you now. So this is the result, a little brief preview of my research. So a lot of people wear these trinkets, or they're kind of like these talismans, these objects that protect you from evil and things like that. So I thought this is actually pretty, in some ways, quite easy to reproduce in Notch. Just these polygonal graphics or shapes, basically cubes and spheres and stuff. And if I had more time, I would have made something a lot more complex. But I think trying to keep it conceptual was also part of the plan. But I also focused on these tattoo designs also. So it was like a type of a typography, and I actually use this as the basis for most of the objects that I imported into Notch as well. So let's open up the Notch projects file. So her set was about an hour long, and she gave me like a premix basically that I worked with, and I broke it down into about like 9 or 10 tracks. And so there's kind of an evolution of the performance of the visual. But I only had maybe 5-6 weeks to work on this, and I was trying to finish up some other stuff at the same time. So generally, most of the audience feedback was actually quite good, and her music is generally quite ambient compared to what they programmed at Mira, which was actually like a lot harder and for the dance floor. So it was a good break in between, and seeing this large scale on the screen was actually a really good feeling as well. So this was kind of like a virtual desert, and there's like this fire in the middle, so I could show you here. If you're not familiar with Notch, I'll just play a little bit with the controls. And if you have any questions, please go ahead. And I'll try to answer some basic questions. But so here there's like this. Oh, the audio is actually coming out of my laptop here and not. Hold on a sec.
No, it's under devices.
Thank
audio
you.
devices.
Audio media devices. It must be this. Okay, cool. So it's reactive live, which is great. Like, this is stuff I could just watch all day long. So it's reacting to the bass. This is for the fire. Sound modifier here. I mean, it's the most obvious way to do audio reactive content is just to have everything sync to the bass, but it's also very satisfying when you're seeing this with a bunch of people in a concert hall.
You're not putting this live?
Yeah, this is playing live.
Show? No, during the show?
During the show, yeah. I would receive her audio through an audio controller, and it was just playing live like that.
Did you experience any latency?
Actually, Notch crashed at some point. It was very brief, but it was because there was like the autosave feature that I forgot to turn off, and it was trying to autosave while I was playing live. And then it crashed for like 10 seconds, and then it was up and running again.
Between the audio coming in and the output, like, is it synced, or do you have to compensate pretty much?
The syncing is actually quite good. There's not much compensation to actually do. I haven't noticed anything, and no one's mentioned anything so far. So it's been quite good. So this is kind of an overview of the scene here, and I wanted to do, it worked on my desktop at home, but normally you should be able to see all these guides of all the objects, like the camera and the volumetric lighting. You should see it during playback, but I can't seem to get it to show up here again. So anyways, you can see that I kind of created these talismanic objects inspired by that anyway. So these were all directly done in Notch. I was trying to keep everything simple and safe to run, not import a lot of external content, and just to make sure that it ran 5 on 4K on my laptop. So that was key, and generally it was actually quite fine.
The volumetric lightings, they come out of the box in Notch, or you have to make a huge setup to make it work?
Sorry for the audio?
No, the light, the volumetric light.
The volumetric, this is, yeah, so this is the node graph here below. And I have the lights are mostly down here. Everything that's here are all light information.
I was just wondering if you have to make some volume blocks and make some lot of tuning, or if you just can switch volumetric.
You can just switch on, yeah. You can,
Just the node you just turned on.
it's literally just a node. Yeah, it's this node here, volumetric lighting. And then I could enhance the smokiness or the depth and stuff right here. I guess it's a little bit hard to see on the small preview. Okay.
You can crank the samples more if you want.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'll show you another one that has Connect. This is a recording of a Connect playback that I did of the artist. But it was basically playing live through the setup that we had. Oh, hold on, maybe it's not the same, it's this one. Okay, yeah.
Could you maybe show some of the workflow of like the 2D elements that you're building? Like for instance, in the backdrop you see
Yeah, so this is like a wall here, yeah. And that's, so the wall is basically just fractal noise. It's an actual node here, right, this. Just to make sure I got the right one. Yeah, it's this one here.
and the circles like preview, or
Yeah, this is the material basically, and you could connect a fractal noise to the color texture. So if you're familiar with a PBR workflow for textures, then it's basically almost the same thing. So you can use the normals and the roughness map and the shininess as well. So I just kept it really simple, and as long as it just felt organic and it fit her visual, so yeah.
Are you influencing your show in any kind of way with the MIDI controller? Is it just the music from the artists that you are interpreting?
It was literally just, I hooked in the audio controller to the output from the artist, and it was just reacting through capture sound, essentially, yeah. This is one scene that I liked that looked really good on the stage. It's like this really huge column. It was like a codex. And then you can clearly see kind of the symbols that I integrated.
How are you doing the audio analysis between each aspect of the...
Basically, there's a sound reactor, a modifier. And for instance, like I mentioned before, it's connected to light, so whenever there's like bass, then it's just gonna flash. But there's different, there's like bass, mids, and highs as well. You could also connect it to speed of turbulence. So I think that there's also that in TD as well. For this rolling speed of the codex here, of the symbols here, let me just check. Okay, yeah. This was actually just, turbulence effector. It's this here, and I had all of the controls are all here. So most of the time during the performance was actually all here, and it's so I labeled everything codex fractal text. I think it's symbols turbulence. Yeah. So there was like a beat pulse modifier, pretty simple. So it's gonna pulse faster now. I actually set cameras. So there's 1, 2, and 3. And it's predefined because I set some modifiers that just go around this loop that I am defined, basically. So
you would put all elements into one scene and you don't need to switch scenes or something like that?
This is one particular scene, but there's about 6 or 7 scenes that I use for the actual performance. I actually made more content, but I ended up using only 6 or 7. So this is one scene that played towards the ending. But if you look here on the timeline, everything that's in gray is like is a different scene. So this is the intro. This is another one that has these rings.
How are you blending between layers? Because I understand
well,
every time that you have layers, but were you leaving any little detail or backgrounds, or you were just snapping through the other layers?
I actually created just a separate render layer to do like a fade in, fade out. So that was it. I think if I set to 0, you're going to see it fade in like that. And that's also like I wasn't trying to do smooth transitions, and it's fine because I think if you're always seeing this for like an hour, like it gets a bit exhausting. So if there's a little break of black, and then a transition to the next audio piece, then it feels like that you're going through time as well. So yeah.
How do you mitigate performance, or do you ever have performance issues that you need to try and...
Yeah. So down here, you can see the power on the GPU and the CPU, and also in Notch there's the same thing here with performance. So I try to keep it under a 20 to and to keep the frame rate like above 30, ideally up to 60 if I can. So the smoother the better, but there's also some other ways. There's the profiler that shows you here. What is it that's consuming the most power as well? So So this scene is quite light and it's running quite smoothly on my laptop, so I'm not really concerned. And I could tell here that on the GPU it's at 10 and 12, so I'm perfectly fine. But if it goes up to 30 and 40 and keeps going up, then it's kind of a concern, and then it's gonna slow down, and it might even crash if you try to, you know, because I'm running stuff through the builder, which Notch, they don't actually really want you to do. They want you to export a block and then to play that block basically through a media server. All right, I'm gonna go through the next project. But this is more of a classic motion graphic piece. I was commissioned by the School of Digital Arts in Manchester to do a promotional piece for the new school that opened last year. So the building was still in construction when I was working on this, and I worked with the head of the department, Toby Hayes. Previously, he has a collective with Code 9 from Hyperdub, and they do audio projects together, and I was like the visual artist for their a collective project. So I'm going to show you briefly. This is a bit long, but I'm going to show you briefly what I did.
Shifts in digital technology are changing everything. How we create and share content, games, film, media, and more. Creative industries are demanding a new kind of digital practitioner, one that can pioneer the next generation of digital storytelling. This demands a new type of education, a new type of school. Welcome to the School of Digital Arts, a dynamic new home for content creation, a digital playground where creativity
So
meets.
this is not Notch, that's with the Unreal Engine here. So that was my first Unreal project
in
last year.
Manchester, one of Europe's fastest growing digital cities. A school within a globally recognized university. Meeting place designed to
Because you can't actually get this kind of complexity in Notch. I mean, it's possible, but it takes a lot more work. And I was working with the assets from the architects, and it was easier to import this into Notch, into UE than it was into Notch as well. So.
The next generation of digital practitioners can navigate and drive how we discover,
Sorry?
consume, and share emerging
Uh,
ideas and
This is, I mean, I was used to using Notch, and
digital story.
I proposed that I'd made this in Notch, and they were okay with it. So
Inspiration and
the Unreal part. So that was
industry.
a pre-render, yeah, and it just made sense to do this in Unreal because there's lots of free assets that you can use to populate the scene, like the furniture that you saw, you know. So it was just already made to run in real time, essentially. Yeah.
In the fast-changing
But I
creative
feel like this kind of project is kind of the perfect project to do in Notch because it's for a motion graphic piece, and you could do variations quite easily in Notch. I'm used to keyframing content, so I was able to combine keyframe animation with like the generative aspect of doing animation in Notch in real time as well.
sound designers, composers, and editors mix the
I had more time than normal because of the pandemic. There were some delays last year, but I had about 8 months. But I worked on this for like 5 months, so it was from January until August about. All right. So I'm gonna show some of the scenes again. So this is the web design and UX module. Basically, they wanted different 15, 20-second pieces to show on their social media platforms as well. So I opted for like an aesthetic that looked good on the phone, which is how most people consume their content these days. So I had this flat lens here, with the camera here. And that's the temporary audio that I'm going to mute a little bit. And so the idea was that the content was floating up over the screen surface as well. So let me just Yeah, so this is the main cloner. And you can obviously change things like color as well, I think, here. That color ramp, is that working? Oh, yep. So this kind of content is really predefined once you know what you want to do. It's really just, it's going to play for 15, 20 seconds, and there's some keyframe animation that I could show you. It's very simple though, but it's just about doing the prep work to make it look good, right? Here, and I think there's an overview here of most of the curves of the animation. So it was really just that moment where you see all the stuff pop up like that. So this blue background, this is all part of their branding campaign as well. So I had to adapt to that as well. And this is actually the second version. So the second version is the final version of what I sent them. But the first version I can show you had more like grayscale colors, more pale. I actually thought it was nicer in terms of the choices of color. Is it here? Yeah, it was kind of like this. Classic tunnels, particle lines.
Games, films.
And this is kind of one of the first versions that I worked on. There's a lot of emphasis.
Filmmaking empowers creatives to express ideas and stories through narrative fiction, documentary.
Yeah, so this is what I worked on in the first version. It's kind of like this look. So these assets are actually from Unreal assets that I re-imported into Notch, actually. So that was quite interesting how you could actually transfer all the textures and model information into Notch, and basically they kind of work the same way.
Is the renders taken directly from Notch and the client accepted, or do you put it into DaVinci and you grade it, or are you doing the color grading and everything inside of Notch?
I used Premiere Pro actually to do the editing, and basically every week I sent new updates on new content, maybe like 1 or 2 modules per week, and then they said yes or no, or do you want to change something and stuff like that. But yeah, basically by April, from January till April, I had a first full draft of the entire thing. Let's look at something else.
We also got a question from the stream.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, what laptop did you use for your Notch pieces, or are you using?
I'm using the Asus S17, which came out. I actually bought this last year, in 2021, and I could probably show you briefly just the actual specs. S17 Zephyrus. It wasn't cheap, but it was actually worth it. Oh, it actually went down in price. Oh, this is M16. Sorry, it's this one. It's pretty fancy, and it's got this keyboard that actually lifts over. If you look at the photo here, maybe you don't. This is actually the old model. But it's this class, and it has an RTX card. So that was quite important to know that it has a graphic card that is fit for my next projects for the next few years as well.
Are you using ray tracing in any of these?
No, and that's why the renders were actually quite fast. And we didn't need to use ray tracing because they wanted this kind of clean aesthetic. And I think ray tracing, it would have added a bit more detail, but it wasn't really worth it, actually. So yeah, it was a lot of assets that I imported. You know, I think Notch, like any other software, I think it's only as good as the assets that you import, and then there's also the basic nodes in the software that helps complement what you're actually creating. I'm actually going to move on to the next project as well, which the last one. This is kind of more recent. It's like last month. I did this online stream for this event. And I'm going to just play the trailers that I put together. Just and that I get to explore technique. But I think at this point I was already comfortable with a lot of the way I work with Notch, and it's really just recomposing assets in a different way and in a different style. So I'll just show you briefly some scenes from this project.
Just out of curiosity, the shape that I'm looking at, is it entirely generated within Notch, or is it?
No, this is a 3D model asset. It's just a tunnel, and I just made a loop out of it, like a ring, essentially. And the focal point, I had this grand idea, but then I only had 2-3 weeks, but I decided to focus on this kind of a device which has the name of the event, Enter the Void, and the name of the artist. It was kind of like a trademark or like a signature. And you see it go through different zones or spaces. So I actually need to load it up.
Just saying we have 4 minutes left.
Yep. I'll just show you. Normally, like, I usually work with a rough storyboard, and this helps break down all the content I have to do. I think most of you kind of work with some type of way like this, but I got a mix of like 24 minutes, and there were about 12 tracks, and I basically broke down what I ideally wanted to do. And then once I realized that I had no time, then I just focused on this device that you see floating in space. And I think that was enough. And most of the feedback from the public that are into this music, they thought it was really, really cool overall. So this is always important for me to do, to understand what I have to do and how to break down the actual content. Okay, so this is the same scene running in Notch. This is, see, so it's like a big ring like this, and if I pause it, then you can see the guide. So this is the camera. Normally, you should be able to see this in real time, but I don't know why it's not showing up when I play it. So essentially, what I see in the viewport is exactly like what I'm going to export as well. And there's the texture is missing here because it's from, I did this on my desktop, so you just see a white screen, unfortunately. But like, I could change the colors of the lights here. I could find myself.
Basically, you're doing those lights through the UV map of the textures?
These lights, just cloners, and with the here, with the emissive parameter, then I just, or actually color here, but the color changes to red after this, near the end of the track. Actually, I'll just show you, so that's just obvious. And the lights are reacting once again to the audio, so I don't need to keyframe anything, which is great. And I'll
place the device in space.
Oh yeah, this is actually just, I attached a null to the camera, and it's literally floating in front of the camera. So it's connected here on this null. You can see it like this. I could just move it around like that. So I added some extra parameters to give a sense that it's really floating in this space. If I disable all of the parameters, it's just going to be stiff like that, right? So the more movement you add, the more exciting it gets, the more realistic it becomes as well. And because this is a 3D model that I purchased, I actually wanted to spend more time, if I could, to add, because this is a cable that's supposed to attach to something, and there's a chain that has like this cap on it, and I wanted to do the physics as well, but I didn't have enough time, and it takes a bit of more testing to actually have this really feel like it's floating in space, right? Let's look at one more scene. This is the mode. This one I enjoy doing. So this is like this holographic look of the device. I essentially just adjusted the textures that you could see here. Yeah, this is like a fractal noise texture, and yeah, it's these colors here, yellow, red, green, so you can see already. I mean, I could keep going, but I think this is the end of the talk as well. So it was a lot of content, and thanks for being here to listen. And if you want to know, all this stuff is available online through my website, and I'm on all the socials, so thank you.
next guest that doesn't have a very far way, just has to walk over from his desk. It still took us a long time to get him here. So we're very happy that Mickey van Olst is going to present. Mickey is kind of indisposable for the media and tech art scene in Berlin, I would say. He's behind a lot of impressive projects. I think of him as a Renaissance man. I don't know what Mickey can do. Haven't found out in the few years that he's been here. After this powerful introduction, I think we're looking very much forward to hear from Mickey, who's going to talk about how he uses TouchDesigner also as a tool to help him to produce and prototype custom electronic devices for art installations.
I think you're doing the talk better than I do, so. Yeah, thank you so much, Stefan. So given that this is my first time presenting anything here, after a lot of encouragement from Stefan, I figured maybe I'll first give a quick intro on some of the things that I do and my background, and then I would like to dive into a few example projects and talk a little bit about how I use hardware development in junction with TouchDesigner and why I think they are a good match and how, yeah, like how the interplay works there. So I'm just showing a few slides with like some various projects. I've been in Berlin for about 8 years now, and I came initially to Berlin for a studio called Informative, which I was part of for the first 3 years. And after that, I started freelancing and realized that I needed to find a way to be quicker with my work methods. Like, and that's where I started using TouchDesigner and node-based programming. My initial sort of like beginning in programming goes way back to ActionScript and Flash, and from there on developed into open frameworks and C++, and yeah, like the scripting side of things I felt quite comfortable with. And then once sort of like GPUs became very important, I started realizing, okay, I need to change my workflow and embrace a bit more of a hybrid approach. And given that I knew that in Touch you can also do scripting, I felt this is a good way for me to kind of go into it. So my initial TouchDesigner projects were much more scripted than they were node-based, and that sort of gradually became sort of an equilibrium where I feel like I hope I used the right thing for the right tool. But like, let's see. As probably many of you, I've always had a very hard time defining what it is that I actually do. Yeah, like basically I always just kind of go where my interest follows me, and yeah, like also just sort of very deep into, I don't know, I feel like there's always a way to kind of get into something. I never really felt these barriers. I always was just trying to mess around, and when I was quite young, my parents, for example, they wouldn't let me touch any of the devices because I was always very keen to touch all the buttons. So they were like, okay, you need to read the manual for any device that you touch. So at 10 years old, I was reading the Windows 95 manual, and I feel like since then I've reached that age or like that state that I don't need to read a manual for anything ever again. I just sort of have the compounded manual knowledge that just kind of applies to anything, or like that's the perfect world. My background in terms of studies is in new media arts, and I studied at what traditionally was more of a cinema and art school. So cinema and film art is also much more sort of like the lens through which I've developed conceptually and visually, and then sort of using technology as a means to communicate that. But I feel like that's really been sort of like where my base is always at. Also, I see myself much more of an art director and designer that just happens to do a lot of engineering and programming projects, which I guess some people call creative technologists. I'm not quite happy with the term. If anyone has a better one, please let me know. And one thing that, like Stefan kind of touched upon that already, like this like very broad sort of like interest that goes into quite different fields where you're like, how does that work? And I personally find it very intuitive. It's something where I see that my skill set in one aspect overlaps with something completely different. Like becoming better at programming, object-oriented programming, can help you in building better firmware for microcontrollers. Or becoming better with node-based programming helped me with my circuit designs for PCBs, for example. So at Informative, I kind of like got more deeply involved in doing these sort of like physical hardware projects, and learned a lot more about electronics than I actually wanted to know initially. And that kind of got driven deeply by a mantra that I heard quite early on in my career from a programmer that said that simple things should be simple and that hard things should be possible. And I always kind of stood by that, and I felt like that was always sort of my way of like doing things and like kind of accepting that I could step into a realm and play around. And electronics kind of eluded that. It just didn't follow the mantra. Like things that were looking extremely simple were extremely hard, and I just couldn't get that to click somehow. And in the end, I realized that a lot of experience is part of that it's really about hitting your nose against problems that are outside of a realm. Like you can spend 3 days programming the firmware of a sensor and then finding out that it was actually not working because your breadboard wasn't properly grounded or something like that. Like you have to completely widen up your scope of like what you consider. Maybe some of you have ever seen a talk by Art and Com. Like they talk about this project that they did for, I think it was BMW or another car brand, where all the balls that were moving up and down could form like really beautiful shapes in cars. So when they were setting this up, somewhere along the line, a different command got sent up to all of the motors, and they all went up full speed into the ceiling and completely destroyed the entire installation. They never saw so many people crying at work that day. And I think this is a really crucial element of like physical installations, like that there is no Control Z. There are so many things that we are used to with the way that we develop things that apply differently to the real world, but yet also not. Like there is a lot of overlap, and the overlap, I think this is kind of what I want to dive in a bit deeper with my talk. Before I start showing things like the specific project, I just want to give a shout to Jan Bernstein. Jan Bernstein has been a long collaborator with me, and he is responsible for pretty much all of the physical aspects of the projects that I work on in terms of mechanics. And let's see. Besides that, I work a lot for like various studios here in Berlin and elsewhere. So a lot of the projects you'll see, you might know from other studios or other artists even. Just saying that out loud. Let's see. So what do TD and hardware development actually have in common? Like why do the top one and the bottom one share a relationship of some sorts? So first off, like it's my cue for handing out some PCBs. You can pass these around. I would like to have them back. Yeah. And one more. And one more. All right. So both of them handle logic like circuits. You can build complexity out of simpler components that become something more elaborate. They both also require a certain level of self-discipline. So like you get a lot of freedom, but this freedom also comes at a price. And let's see. You also need to have a lot of consistency and organization. Besides that, that's pretty much where it stops actually. Like, you might wonder, why am I putting these two together? And it's because basically in any hardware project that I'm doing, I find myself using TouchDesigner somewhere along the way. Often at the most crucial moments when I'm making choices about the hardware itself and about how to design something for a physical installation, for example. So why does that happen? Well, first off, Touch is a really great way to quickly prototype control interfaces. Like whenever I'm working on a piece of hardware and I just need to find a way to interact with it, Touch is the quickest way to set up an interface, have the communication going, and make sure that my device is talking to my computer. Besides that, like usually with these installations, like you don't always have the physical thing that's a luxury. Like usually that just comes at the end. You do all of the work before, and then at some point you step into a room and you have this thing that is bigger than all of the parts that you've had before. And you need to prepare for that somehow. So I often end up simulating my installations in TouchDesigner to be able to have some sort of a real-time environment where I can virtually play with it already. And it also allows for a more fluid approach to designing software and hardware and kind of going back and forth between them. Like sure, hardware and software are two different things, but the decision making and the design process itself is very similar. You're making similar considerations and similar choices, and also one affects the other. So it's only logical that you try to do them at the same time. And the other thing that I really like is that you can transfer the heavy lifting of certain challenges. Something that might be extremely hard to compute on a microcontroller can be quicker to do in TouchDesigner, and then you can later port it, for example, to another type of environment, or you can even pre-calculate or compute what you need to know in order to be able to play that on the hardware itself. I'll get into that later. So the project that I first would like to show is Research Wall with Schnelle Ubuntu Builder. And this is in the Humboldt Forum here in Berlin. Maybe some of you guys have been there already. It's a big museum that's opened up 2 years ago. And this project consists of 24 kinetic columns that are moving projection surfaces. So we are projecting on moving surfaces that are shrinking and growing and positioning themselves in real time. So it means that you have, essentially like changing screens, but because of the physical aspect to it, it really gets a different kind of dimension. When people see it, they often don't even realize that it's physical until you start to notice there's something more to it. And this project really provided a lot of challenges in terms of like keeping that projection in sync with the physical motion, because you have to deal with inertia, with things moving around in the physical world, how to keep that in sync, as well as the limitations of the hardware, like what is the maximum speed you can move some of these columns, for example, or like how quickly can you get from one motion to another, or which types of motions are more likely to trigger things like shaking, for example. Like these are all things you have to consider. Let's see. Just going through these. Yeah, so this is an example of the PCB. I don't think I have that one. This is another one, the one you guys have. In terms of PCB, actually, there's not so much going on here. It's relatively straightforward. It's simply using a microcontroller along with some really sort of like, the black boxes you see on the right are stepper drivers, but bigger than the ones that you normally would see in an Arduino project. And one other aspect that was really important with this project was safety, because we have physical things moving up and down that are weighing quite a bit above an audience that is maybe interacting with it, or a child that might touch a wire or something like that. So we had to really consider a lot of safety precautions with this project. So all of the motors, they have internal brakes that can be triggered, a lot of sensors that make sure that anything that is off is going to be taken care of. Here you see some of the internal hardware. Another thing that was really challenging with this project is that you see here on the right this like black scroll. This is where all of the hardware is inside of. So we have a moving head that is containing most of the hardware of the project, and then in turn that is again moving another scroll which is moving the surface. So we have a double pulley system almost, if you think about it. And it also means that if you want to be really accurate with your predictions about where things are, you need to even start factoring in things like the changes of the diameter of the scroll as it sort of unwinds and coils up the paper, which has a thickness. These are all things that you have to calculate in order to be precise enough. So here you see some of the testing going on. So at start, it always goes all the way up, it calibrates, and then it moves itself down, similar to how you might do it with a 3D printer, for example. And once it knows its bearing, its homing position, that's when you can start doing things. Also, what's nice is that the white cables that you see that it's hanging on are actually multi-channel data cables. So we're providing power and we're providing data communication through those, they're called vlagbandkabel, like ribbon cables. So here you see my very interface heavy TouchDesigner patch for this project. Because we had 24 of these units and I had to find a way to test them, work with them, figure out where the kinks were. The majority of challenges there were about communication issues, like how do you make sure that the latency is as low as possible. All of them had to give real-time feedback as well to where they are. in the end, the system itself, the media system is V4, so like everything needed to be self-contained. And they just had to say where things go, and the machines take care of it by themselves. Here you see some of the testing that's going on for that. So everything is like using network protocols in order to use an OSC broadcast, so each of the units just grabs their own stuff in order to keep the bandwidth bottleneck as low as possible, or big as possible. And then here I can easily use touch to test to see, okay, where do things start to break down? What happens if I add more virtual units? Do I get like a bottleneck on my network card, for example, with the data that's coming in and out? Or is there any like loss of data? So yeah, these are things that I could all test sort of remotely without having to be physically at the space of the museum.
Can I ask how long that took and how many people worked on it?
So in terms of the physical part of the project, that's just me and Jan. And the media projection stuff, that's Snelle Ubuntu Builder, and I think they worked on it with maybe three people or something like that. Yeah.
From start to finish, how long?
It's hard to say because of the pandemic. You know, things kind of stopped and started a bit. I would say in terms of actual work, it was maybe 3 months of work. Yeah, maybe a little bit more. Yeah.
Very nice.
Thanks. Let's see. Then moving on to Fireflies, which is with Kling Klang Klong. This was a project that was shown last year at the Himmel unter Berlin. Let's see if I can show a video. And they wanted to make, I mean, Kling Klang Klong is a sound studio, right? So they wanted to make a sound piece that was physical. And because they wanted to have so many units, the answer was pretty clear to make it as much PCB based as possible. So I tried to design this whole project in a way that it used a minimal amount of manual labor. So everything is basically a PCB, from like the Fireflies themselves are a PCB, the distribution units are PCBs, everything is with like JST connectors that can be clicked into it. I didn't want to solder a single thing on this project, so like that's why everything is made in a way as if it's a product. And also making it in a way that it's extendable and modular, and that I know that if they come back next year and they want to expand it, it's possible. It's quite something if you're there, because like it's basically like hundreds of little speakers, right? So you physically can feel the motion moving past you, even like small gusts of wind. I'm just moving a bit faster on this. So yeah, these are just some like really early tests. Nice little detail. What is causing a lot of the sound aren't just the motors, but they're actually like two glass volumes that contain like little metal beads, and they're used for fishing. So I got those off Alibaba, thank you. Let's see. So yeah, also with a project like this, touch is of course used. This is one of the finished PCBs on the right. And yeah, like during a project like this, I really often just kind of go back and forth on like designing the layout, figuring out the logic, and also a lot of the testing and communication where touch is just really essential. And in this project, like it was in the end controlled using a Unity simulation that was built by Felipe. But I still use touch as a quick way to, you know, like set up an ArtNet in order to do the communication, check out all the protocols. It just saves me a lot of time, and I run into problems sooner, which is always good. So here you can see some of these elements.
Communicates over ArtNet to the
yeah, because so with the previous project, that was actually very complex in terms of communication, because like sure we had relatively simple commands in terms of like go there and go there, but you had so many different ways of calibrating it. It almost had its own sort of like terminal-based operating system where you could set all kinds of variables, and like it would remember those on the machine itself in its EEPROM memory on the microcontroller. Everything had to be self-contained. With this one, it was much more straightforward. It's just like pipe into it a bunch of PWM data with variable, you know, between 0 and 255, and that's enough to kind of get the information you need to know, okay, this much light and this much motor movement. The challenge here was much more about how do I hook up so many units and not spend 4 weeks crimping cables, or so like a lot of stuff, like, you know, a lot of the learnings also with these kinds of projects are about like how do you do your supply chain, or like how do you work with companies that can make custom cables, for example, like all these kinds of things. So this is one of the units. It's like much bigger in the end, but like these are like the subunits, and each of them has its own IP address. It's able to communicate over a network switch, and it made like a lot of that aspects of the project much easier. Also because like in the end you have a sort of handover, right? So like Klink and Klong receives this sculpture, and then they start playing with it. So it's important for me to make sure that I write the firmware in a way that it's friendly towards their goals of what they want to achieve with it. Okay, and then the last project is the ecliptic sculpture, which is, there's no documentation of this project yet, so bear with me, it's just, smartphone pictures. So this project, it's a essentially like a giant Mobius curve that is placed inside of a store that sells watches, like very fancy watches. And I worked together with this on an artist that involved me, and his concept was that this Mobius bond would essentially be sort of a compass that would always resemble the position of the outdoor situation with the celestial bodies, and then especially the sun. So this thing is always correctly displaying where the sun is at any given moment in time, and it's also knowing exactly when the sun sets, where it sets, and if you would strip away the building, you should be able to look through it and see exactly the sun at the same position as where this thing is. Now, this might seem very simple, like, oh yeah, you just have the sun, it just goes from here to here, and then that's it. It's actually much more complicated, as I found out, and I had a bit of a personal challenge in this project as well that I really wanted to do. So this is my grandfather here on the right, and that's his sextant on the left, and it was his job. He was a sailor and spent his entire life going all over the world, and before GPS and computers, he was able to get within just a few hundred meters of where he was just by looking at the angle between the sun and the horizon and knowing the exact time at which this is done. And in a way, like the way that he does that, I've used a sort of a similar method for this project as well, where I didn't want to be reliant on the internet or like other things like that. So this installation receives with a ferrite bead a signal coming from a radio tower somewhere in Germany called DCF-77. It's a fascinating topic. Like I cannot go into it too deep on the talk, but I could give a whole talk just about DCF-77. It's a binary format that you can actually tune into and you can hear it, and it's at 1 bit per second. So you can encode it if you are handy enough with knowing the sequences of what they mean. So this thing is hooked up to an atomic clock. It's always accurate. I never have to go there and change the clock or anything like that. It will always be in sync. And the reason that's so important is because I'm using the exact time as a lookup method for determining what colors to show on the installation, which resembles the correct positions of the sun. Now these are the LEDs, which are high intensity ones, so I had to make them myself. I won't go into that too much. Small word of advice. You saw really beautiful PCBs earlier. This client didn't have so much budget, and then I was like, okay, well, then you don't get fancy PCBs. But the problem is that I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot, because without fancy PCBs, I can spend a lot of non-fancy time soldering things together. That takes forever. So yeah, like go for the PCB option. It might seem daunting, but it's actually going to save you time in the end. Now, these are some early tests. You see touch in the back, always good. Some other tests showing real-time playback. Another thing that I found very important, given that this was a light installation and a permanent sculpture, that there was a lot of room for us to really get the lighting right. So I essentially designed the firmware to be able to work in 2 modes. One is a live mode, which allows me to directly connect it to a USB plug with serial to connect and display any color on all of the different lights in the installation and play it back from TouchDesigner as if I'm VJing. And the other one is to have a recorded playback mode, which essentially takes a database that I generate out of TouchDesigner and then uses that as a lookup table to look exactly at this time in the year. This is the kind of color that I should be showing. So now I'll quickly move into the project. So yeah, I mentioned earlier in the talk about heavy lifting of problems. Like this was definitely a really prime example of that. Given that I'm using Touch to do the simulation of the piece, but I'm also using TouchDesigner to bring in a Python library for astronomers that allows me to calculate very precisely where the sun is going to be positioned. And this involves knowing the the atmospheric pressure. It involves knowing the like where, like how much elevated you are from the ocean. So knowing the place that we are, Berlin in this case, and then knowing that the sun actually doesn't have a linear path to it. Like for example, the noon, which is 12 o'clock, is normally the highest position of the sun. That's not really true. It actually wiggles kind of back and forth throughout the year. It's up to 20 minutes earlier or later than noon. So yeah, this is just really interesting to learn within this project. So like, what I'm doing then is like I'm generating for a 10-minute interval this database of like all of the different positions of the sun and other info I want to know about the sun. And then I take this database and I convert it into a shader that allows me to basically turn a day into a texture. So like this is one day as a texture. And if I would move over to, let's see, if I would move over to here. And I'd go into this one. Then I can kind of like mess around with this position a bit. Yeah, okay, there we go. And yeah, here, so for example, now you see that we're actually much later in the year and that it's already summer and that the sun is much longer than it was in the winter. So like, I'm just kind of like switching back and forth between these two. Where are we? Yeah. Right, I need to make bigger jumps, I think. Yeah, so now you see like, you know, it's getting shorter and shorter. Also you can see it's like, it's not entirely linear also in terms of its width, which is also like another aspect of the sun, of like how long throughout the day. But you can kind of read this top to bottom as if this is 24 hours. Then what I do is like I write all of that data into a texture that already accounts for like the gaps in the LEDs, because not all of them have lighting. Yeah, like formatting it in a way that I can turn it into a massive CSV file, which then can be interpolated with its values by the microcontroller. Let's see. And then, yeah, like for the live feedback, I'm basically converting it into a custom protocol where I'm just sending over byte arrays that it's able to receive and then display. Where also Touch is nice because you have Python, which makes things like bit casting and bytes a bit more friendly in terms of like the feedback you get, because otherwise if you're doing this in C++, it can be very difficult to find out what your error actually is. So yeah, just like reducing those cycles and like not having to wait for compiling and so on, that really helps. And then once I'm happy with it and I know my principle works, I can still decide then to convert that to C++ or something else. Let's see. This is the place from the outside. It's in Friederstrasse. If any of you guys are keen on watches, you can look it up.
It's an investment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's my talk. Thank you.
This is one question. Your final output, was that just a playback of is it interpolated in real time and just you have your file uploaded into like a player?
Yeah, like essentially like I have this database with 10-minute intervals of not the position of the sun, because I don't care about that on the microcontroller. I just care about what I want to show on the lights. So this also meant that it made it much nicer for me as in terms of lighting design, because I can do the lighting design in Touch with like textures and, you know, like all the nice things you can do. So I'm literally just like kind of like saving this like massive file of like RGB, like, I mean, you can see it here somewhere, I think, yeah. Yeah, like this is basically my database.
10 minutes you save it out?
Yeah, every 10 minutes I save it out, and then what I do is that on the microcontroller itself, I use an interpolation method to always calculate between the previous and the next data point. Yeah, and time is a very fascinating topic in terms of microcontrollers. So just some things that I've learned during this project is that in the world of microcontrollers and computers, you don't really, like, I don't care about months and weeks and stuff like that. Like the Gregorian calendar is really shit for if you're trying to do computer stuff. So I calculate everything in Unix time, and Unix time is the amount of milliseconds since January 1st, 1970. Yeah, so that's basically how I am able to kind of like make comparisons between the different times, and also knowing, okay, well, if I get from this atomic clock this time and I then convert it into Unix time, which gives me an absolute measurement, I can go into my database and be like, I have this many entries, so if I map those along my milliseconds in the year, I can kind of find out which entry I'm supposed to be at. And then I know, oh wait, well, I'm not perfectly at this entry, so then I interpolate between the two that I'm before and after, relative to what position it is.
How long are you going to plan to let this run? Because the Unix timestamp, as it probably is implemented, will end 2038.
So in Germany, you have a legal obligation for 1 year of warranty for your projects. And after that, they have to prove it, and then it's 1 more year. Stop cranking my stuff. Yeah, any other questions of like touch and hardware, or like hardware development in general, or like installations? Do any of you guys use touch in hardware projects, or like in this kind of method, or?
In this first project where you put the motors, I noticed you use Arduino. Was it in the final setup, or you made your own controllers?
So yeah, I can say my favorite microcontroller is Teensy, which is a microcontroller that runs with an ARM processor, and it's really fast. Kind of overkill for most of my projects, to be honest. But I like overkill, so you know. Yeah. But yeah, like in terms of programming, like I don't use the Arduino IDE or something. I usually use like Platform IO, for example, and then yeah, Visual Studio Code. I kind of like I also do some teaching, and then I sometimes use Python as a method for teaching microcontrollers to students, because I find that that's a bit more friendly than C++ at least. But given the vast amount of libraries that are available in C++, it just doesn't make sense to do it for myself to do everything in Python. So yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
I really like the simulations in TouchDesigner, like the whole installation looks super nice. And I have the question about the light installation, like you mentioned briefly about the custom build LEDs.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something inside these tubes, inside the profiles.
Yeah, you can see like they're really bright. Like this is like, we're talking about lightsaber brightness here. And it's a pain in the ass, I can tell you. It's a very different world than regular LEDs. So I ended up using, Jan ended up having to design a custom heatsink for me, just to deal with the amount of heat that they generate. I ended up having to design a PCB just to get them in a form factor small enough that he was happy. So that's what you see here in the lower right corner. And you can see it's getting really tricky because like there's no space here. Like I spent like a whole day or 2 days maybe just thinking purely about how do I manage to close all the gaps without, you know, it's like painting into a corner and then hoping that you end up in the right place, like the door. So yeah.
And there are multiple of those in one tube.
It's only one.
It's only one.
Yeah, but it's two. You can see here it's like it's 2 LEDs, 2 RGBW LEDs per acrylic tube. Yeah, and this is also one of the reasons like why this project was very tricky, is because if you see here all of these white PCBs, the top and bottom ones, those are LED drivers. Like normally when you have LEDs and you work with them, like I don't know, NeoPixels or what you might know, those are really dependent on having the right kind of voltage. But high intensity LEDs care exactly about the right kind of amperage. If the amperage flickers or like isn't constant, they will flicker. So it's a very different way of having to make the components that create them. Also to make sure that they last long enough, because like you can make those LEDs maybe work like fine for like an hour or so with just like hooking up some voltage to it. But if it's going to be in there for years, then you need to make sure that they stay within spec. So yeah. But yeah, like very challenging was just like making sure that they were small enough to fit in. I'm not sure if I have a picture of like the actual base of this, but it's literally like a lightsaber, basically. Yeah. If you see them. The voltage that it's running on is 24 volts. Yeah.
And then this is just like a plexiglass.
It's acrylic rods. Yeah, like it's solid acrylic. Yeah.
It's empty in the center.
Sorry?
It's empty in the center.
No, it's solid. Yeah, they weigh a ton. It's like really, yeah. But all of the ones that are not with light, those are hollow. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of how we mitigated it. Yeah.
Okay. I think I would make a cut here from the directive side and say, please continue this conversation over at the Omega Bar, where we reserved again a table for all of us. So I'm really glad that all of you were here today, and thanks again for every presenter that presented today. It was, I think, quite a show today. So thank you all for coming, thank you for presenting, and let's enjoy our conversations over at the Omega Bar now. And again, I'm just going to take the microphone because the internet needs to hear that too. We will have our next roundtable again next year in January, and this time again we're going to go back to the regular slot of the last Thursday of the month. And we are, of course, as always, looking for speakers. So if you have something to show, if you have something to present, and as you have seen today, it doesn't have to be specifically touch design related, feel free to get in contact with Stefan. He's over there. And he can give you the contact information basically about everything, but also you can always check our website, thenodeinstitute.org. The is quite important in this case because there's a Node Institute, that's not us, so we are the Node Institute. So yeah, feel free to come onto us and present something, anything that's of interest. We are open for everyone. And yeah, especially like if you know some, because we try to diversify a little bit, so we are definitely looking for, like we are also looking for people of color, we're looking for female participants, like all of the LGBTQ+, because it's still quite white male dominant. So let's all try to diversify a little bit here. In that regard, I see you over there for one beer, and then I think I have to go, sadly, but ciao, ciao.